Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Bryan.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to get into the topic that we're going to be talking about today. But before we get started, I always like to have a little introductory origin story and how you got into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Just like any life or career, it's been a journey. I'm a small town Texas boy, grew up, about an hour outside of Austin in central Texas, and um, went to the University of Texas out of high school, got a degree in biochemistry. And then from there, I went to LSU School of Medicine. I got a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology. And that was at the time the Nobel Prize had just been awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide. I was a first
Hmm.
year student, was looking to do research, and was introduced to this new science of nitric oxide. So that's where, I was first introduced to this. We knew it was an important discovery, an important molecule because a Nobel Prize had just been awarded. But even then, it's been 25, almost 30 years ago now and there were, and understand nitric oxide is a gas. It's naturally produced in the body. And once it's produced, it's gone in less than a second. So the
Hmm.
work I did during my PhD was trying to figure out when nitric oxide is produced, where does it go, what does it become, and how does it signal? And then once we figured that out, then I went to Boston University School of Medicine. I did a postdoctoral fellowship there in cardiology and vascular biology, continuing the research on nitric oxide and publishing a number of papers, high impact papers. And then from there, I was recruited by Fred Murad, one of the guys who shared the Nobel Prize, and got my first faculty position as a professor of molecular medicine at UT
Hmm.
Medical School in Houston back uh, in Texas, looking for a way to get back to Texas from Boston. It's culture shock for a small town country boy. But really, my work continued there. Is for 10 years in academia, made a lot of discoveries, filed a lot of patents because we'd figured out how to make nitric oxide. We understood how the human body made nitric oxide. We understand
Hmm.
what led to a loss of its natural production, and then we could start to develop product technology and drug therapy to overcome nitric oxide deficiency. So 25 years, a lot of education, a lot of training, a lot of discoveries, a lot of research, and I've published today, I guess, over 100 peer-reviewed papers, dozens of issued
Amazing.
patents, and so here we are. And we've learned a lot, but we still have a lot to do.
Well, you sound very smart and well versed, which I love because I think that when you really spend your career focusing on one thing, you really become an expert. And it becomes like and it is an important thing you're focusing on. I know with my work, we work a lot on trying to get more blood flow to the uterus to try to help women conceive and also have more success through IVF, when their uterine lining is too thin. So some of the things that I do is I try to, suggest things like beetroot, things that increase nitric oxide. But I know you know a lot more on really how the body processes it, which I'm really excited to learn about today as a practitioner. And I know a lot of people listening to this. This is actually a really important molecule. You said, right?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
hopefully after this conversation, we're going to get you off of beet juice because beet juice is not a source of nitric oxide.
Oh, okay. So I want to learn more about this because I know that it helps with blood. It's not beet juice; it's beetroot powder.
Yeah,
That
beetroot
they
powder.
use.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, most of the commercial products out there provide zero nitric oxide benefit. In fact, we've used a number of these as placebos in clinical trials because I
Okay.
think there's a misconception, and that's why these conversations are important because we have to correct the record.
Oh, for sure. And I'll be the first to say that I'm always learning new things, and
We should all
of
be.
course,
Me too.
sometimes we learn wrong things as well. So, first of all, explain to people who are first hearing about this what nitric oxide is, past like being a molecule. Like, what is it? What does it do in the body? And then we can go into the misconceptions.
Sure. Well, no, nitric oxide, as I mentioned, it's a gas. It's what we call a signaling molecule. It's how cells in the body communicate with one another. It was first discovered as a vasodilator, meaning that when it's produced in the lining of the blood vessel, it opens up the blood vessel. So now we're going to get better blood flow and oxygen delivery to those downstream tissues. But today we know that it's much more than a vasodilator. It's a signaling molecule. It affects protein structure and functions and turns enzymes and on or off depending upon which enzymes it is. It mobilizes our own stem cells. So now we're going to
Mhm.
repair and replace dysfunctional cells and lead to better recovery.
Hmm.
It activates the mitochondrium, the energy producing organelles of the cell. And then it also
Hmm.
activates an enzyme called telomerase, which prevents the ends of our chromosomes or telomeres from our chromosomes from getting shorter. And we
Hmm.
know today that the shorter telomeres, shorter lifespan, longer telomeres, longer lifespan. So when we look at what nitric oxide does, it improves blood flow, circulation, oxygen delivery, mobilizes stem cells, activates mitochondria, prevents telomere shortening. That's the foundation for human optimization, longevity, disease prevention. Because the hallmarks of every single chronic disease is low blood flow. You lose the regulation of blood flow to that organ, and then you develop
Hmm.
inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. And fortunately for us, and fortunately for the world, nitric oxide overcomes all of those. It addresses the
Hmm.
root cause of every age-related chronic disease.
That's incredible. Uh, you know, Originally I'm thinking about how it dilates blood vessels and that helps with blood flow. They did actually see that blood flow as women age impacts equality as well. And you're mentioning also the mitochondria and how it really kind of is an anti-age or longevity um, molecule. So I would love to talk about how how it is absorbed best in the body.
Well, again, nitric oxide is a gas. It's not a pill you can swallow. You don't get it in a powder, you don't get it in a capsule, and you don't get it in a gummy or a chew. We have to
Hmm.
understand how the human body makes this molecule and then
Hmm.
allow for its natural production. Or you can do like we did. We actually create a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. So, in 2007, we published the very first studies showing that nitric oxide is actually a hormone. So,
Hmm.
not dissimilar to estrogen replacement or estradiol in women or testosterone in men or, thyroid hormone replacement. We have to restore the production of this molecule or actually give the actual molecule. So, if your body can't make it, then we have to provide it for you. But I think most importantly, you've got to figure out why is your body not producing ample amounts of nitric oxide? That's the fundamental question we should try to answer. And then stop doing the things that inhibit its production, start doing the things that can activate and stimulate its production. And then
Hmm.
we've addressed a lot of root cause of chronic disease. But again, nitric oxide is a gas when it's produced either in the lining of the blood vessel or it's produced in the stomach or in the oral cavity from bacteria. It's absorbed immediately. It binds to uh, activates an enzyme called guanylyl cyclase, starts this second messenger system. It binds directly to proteins or cysteine thiazole proteins, and it affects their protein, the structure and function. Hemoglobin is the best example. When we breathe in oxygen, oxygen binds to the heme iron of hemoglobin. It goes from the arteries to the vein, and then during that arterial venous transit through the capillaries, the hemoglobin molecule senses what's called a P50, the 50% oxygen saturation. And then once it senses that, it undergoes a conformational change to offload oxygen and pick up carbon dioxide. But nitric oxide is what regulates that. Nitric oxide bound to a
Hmm.
single cysteine residue is what regulates hemoglobin allostery and oxygen delivery. So without nitric oxide, you can't deliver oxygen. And that's what we saw during COVID. People weren't out of
Hmm.
oxygen, they were out of nitric oxide to deliver that oxygen.
Oh,
That's what we
interesting.
learned. Yeah, the people that got sick and died from COVID were the same people get sick and die from the seasonal flu, and those are the people who are nitric oxide deficient, the elderly,
Wow,
previous heart attacks,
that's fascinating.
diabetics, kidney disease patients. Um, yeah, so immunocompromised patients, especially the respiratory
Hmm.
viruses, are always nitric oxide deficient.
Hmm. So that's what I was going to ask you actually. What inhibits production? You had mentioned a couple of different things that can do that. You said immunodeficient people. What about autoimmune conditions?
Yeah, autoimmune is just it's really the inability to recognize self from non-self, and so that leads to chronic inflammation. So a lot of times, nitric oxide isn't going to fix the autoimmunity. From my perspective, it starts in the stomach and not having
Hmm.
sufficient stomach acid to break down proteins into amino acids. You get peptide fragments absorbed across the gut, and your body recognizes as a foreign antigen, and you develop autoimmune
Hmm.
disease. But it
Yeah.
certainly can suppress the inflammatory response. Nitric oxide is a potent anti-inflammatory molecule. In fact, I have a number of patents on a method of reducing inflammation by nitric oxide. But when we get back to the fundamental question of what leads to a loss of nitric oxide production, we had to first understand how does the human body make it. And so there's
Hmm.
two primary pathways. There's an enzyme that we talked about called nitric oxide synthase.
Hmm.
This enzyme converts arginine into nitric oxide.
Mm-hmm.
And what leads to a loss of function of this enzyme is really sugar. Sugar binds to it, and sugar is sticky and it sticks to this enzyme and makes it to where it can't do its job.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that leads to an elevation in blood sugar and an elevation in insulin is going to completely inhibit nitric oxide production. And then,
Okay.
it's
So
this.
that's why diabetics.
No, that's right. That's why diabetics have poor healing wounds, diabetic macular degeneration, retinopathy,
Mm-hmm.
peripheral neuropathy, because they're not getting adequate blood supply to the nerves, to the eyes, to the wound, and you can't heal the body without adequate circulation and blood flow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, being a diabetic, then the common risk factors: smoking, sedentary lifestyle, some drug therapy, for instance, getting your cholesterol too low, cholesterol lowering medications, proton
Mm-hmm.
pump inhibitors, antacids completely shut down the body's ability to produce nitric oxide.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the ones that affect the enzyme. And then we also discovered that there's bacteria that live in and on our body that produce nitric oxide. And so anything that we're doing to disrupt the bacteria. And so
Mm-hmm.
what is that? Well, it's fluoride in drinking water, fluoride in our toothpaste that's killing the
Mm-hmm.
entire oral microbiome. It's anything that's labeled antiseptic mouthwash. Listerine runs the commercials that they
Mm-hmm.
kill 99.99% of the bacteria in your mouth. And
Mm-hmm.
they're actually proud of that. They advertise that. And
Mm-hmm.
today we know that doing that, sterilizing the mouth makes people sick in chronic disease.
Wow.
And yet you see the
Yeah.
advertising running. They're proud of it because they're making people sick. And so we and others have published that if you use mouthwash, it kills the bacteria, decreases nitric oxide production, and your blood pressure goes up. And high blood pressure is the number one driver of the number one killer of men and women worldwide. And
Mm-hmm.
Listerine is leading the charge on killing people
Wow.
because they're
That's
driving
crazy.
the number one killer of men and women worldwide. So we have to get rid of fluoride in our toothpaste. We got to get rid of fluoride in the drinking water. We got to stop using anything that's antiseptic mouthwash, and you got to get off antacids.
Mm-hmm.
So now, and you got to stop eating sugar, anything that causes an increase in blood sugar. Now, if you just
Mm-hmm.
address those four things, now you've released the brakes on the body's ability to make nitric oxide. And now, if
Mm-hmm.
you exercise, if you do deep breathing, if you do
Mm-hmm.
a balanced diet in moderation, 18-hour fast, good protein, good quality fats, less carbs, no sugar, then the
Mm-hmm.
body's optimized to produce its own nitric oxide.
Amazing. And then so typically you would say that it's best to make it yourself, first of all. But then you had mentioned that there are certain, I guess, capsules or supplements or tablets that do give off this gas.
Yeah, so the goal of medicine should be to give the body what it needs, remove from the body what it doesn't need, and let the body do its
Yeah.
job, right?
Yep.
And so that's what I've tried to do as a biochemist and physiologist is understand the mechanism of disease to the extent that we can fix it. So
Yeah.
yeah, the best approach is to remove from the body. But there's some people that have genetic SNPs or what we call single nucleotide polymorphisms. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have a functional copy of certain enzymes. So then you have to supplement or you have to intervene therapeutically. And so you can have SNPs in your nitric oxide synthase gene. You can have SNPs in the MTHFR, which 45 to
Mm-hmm.
50% of Americans have. And then now
Yes.
you're compromising the ability to make nitric oxide. So in those
Mm-hmm.
patients, you have to have some outside help. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where my product technology comes in because again, if your body can't make it, we have to give it to you. We have to make it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't find that in a capsule. Nitric oxide's a gas. You can't get it from false swallowing a capsule. So you have to make the gas. And I've made
So why do they sell them? That drives me crazy.
well
It's
because
crazy.
there's a
You see
huge
them a lot.
market. There's a huge market
Yeah.
for that, and these companies are for-profit companies, and they're trying to convince the consumers that there's a nitric oxide benefit. But you have to understand these companies are run by executives, marketing
Mm-hmm.
people, former
Yeah.
marketing executives who don't have any idea about the science of nitric oxide.
Right.
So just like most people out there, you see these commercials on TV. Hey, take this beet product because it produces nitric oxide. And I've tested every
Mm-hmm.
single one of these beet products.
Yeah.
They don't provide any nitric oxide because it's not the beets, it's not the beetroot, it's not the beetroot powder. There's a molecule in there that has to be present. Then you have to have the right oral bacteria. You have to have stomach acid production. And assuming everything is in place and intact, there's a certain amount of nitrate in that beet powder that has to be present because this is an inherent inefficient system. And so Number one, most of the beet products out there don't contain any detectable nitrate in them, so they're not providing the active ingredient in the beet. Number two is 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash, so even if there was nitrate in the beet powder, 70% of the people wouldn't be able to metabolize it into nitric oxide because they're using mouthwash, or because they're using fluoride toothpaste, or because they have fluoride in their drinking water. And then you have to have stomach acid for this process to work. And there's 200 million prescriptions written for antacids every year. 2 out of 3 Americans use an over-the-counter antacid. So even if the beets that you were taking contain sufficient amount of nitrate, 90% of the population would not get a nitric oxide benefit for it because they don't have the right bacteria, they don't have stomach acid. But again, 95% of the beets that are sold on the market don't contain any detectable nitrate or nitrite. Because here's the deal. These are water-soluble vitamins. And if people don't, most consumers don't know how to manufacture a finished product. So you got to take beets out of the ground. You got to create this, what's called a high-brix concentrated. Then you got to dry it to make a beet powder. And they put this in high pressure, high temperature, and all the water-soluble nutrients come out. So all you're left with is a dead beet. It's a dead beet powder. It does nothing. It provides absolutely nothing. The only thing it does is it turns your pee and your poop pink and red and causes a lot of anxiety. So beets are not nitric oxide, and that's one of my biggest sources of frustration because you turn on your TV or turn on the radio and you see these companies advertising beets, and it's fraudulent. It's deceptive.
Well, I'm seeing it on my, some of the products or my, dispensary.
Yeah.
All of that information as a practitioner.
I mean, look, I'm for capitalism and but we have to maintain the integrity of the field and maintain the integrity.
Yeah.
Because people, and you as a practitioner who recommend this and want and understand the science to the extent that you're trying to increase blood flow to the uterus so you can improve IVF or improve natural conception. And people will come back and go, well, look, nitric oxide doesn't work because I've been taking this beet product. It didn't improve my blood pressure. It didn't make an positive effect on me. So nitric oxide doesn't work. And that's a gross misinterpretation because nitric oxide always works. What didn't work is that company. What didn't work was that product that they were selling you because that product didn't produce nitric oxide. Right. And your body wasn't able to utilize the components in that to make nitric oxide naturally. So that product failed you, that company failed you, and it could kill the entire field. And that's why I'm so passionate and adamant about calling these companies out. And many of these companies have sued me because I reveal and tell the truth about their products and their lack of science, and they don't like it. But we have to tell the truth.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate that because it's information that I was given as a practitioner. And I'd rather know the science and really understand and kind of pick the brains of people like you to really know how it works. And as far as testing this, are there ways people can test it? I know they have test strips, saliva strips. Do those work?
Well, I'm the ones who developed that nitric oxide salivary test strip back in 2010.
Okay.
And so the idea was to answer the question that you posed is how do I know if I'm deficient in nitric oxide? And because nitric oxide is a gas and gone in less than a second, but also because I was the one who mapped out this fingerprint of nanobiology when it's produced, where does it go? What does it become? So I developed a salivary test strip with the intention of this using salivary nitrite as a proxy for nitric oxide production. And so if you know what you're doing, they can be useful. But these are not nitric oxide test strips, by the way. They're not detecting nitric oxide. What we found over time was there's really no false negatives. So if you apply your saliva to that test strip and it doesn't turn pink, then that tells us that your saliva is deficient in a molecule called nitrite. But if you light it up, then it tells your saliva has nitrite. Now, what's the source of that nitrite in the saliva? It could be from NO production. It could be from you're eating a lot of green leafy vegetables and you have the right bacteria. Or it could be that you have an active oral infection that's completely independent and basically contradictory to systemic nitric oxide production. This is why I abandoned those test strips back probably in 2014, 2015, because they were giving too many false positives. You'd have people show up with high blood pressure, erectile dysfunction, diabetes, and they would light that test strip up. And it's not that they're replete in nitric oxide, it's they have an active oral infection. So we would send them to the dentist, and sure enough, they'd have an asymptomatic infection that we picked up only through the saliva test strip. So I abandoned those, and I abandoned the patents on them at the University of Texas. So once you abandon the patent on something, now you have all these companies out there selling these test strips that I developed but abandoned and trying to convince you it's a nitric oxide
Interesting.
test strip. So, I don't measure, I don't test because we rely on symptoms. But I give nitric oxide. There's only two people in the world who need nitric oxide. There's people who are sick and want to get well, and there's people who are well and don't want to get sick. So all in one of those two categories, you should take a daily nitric oxide because the older we get,
So everybody pretty much.
everybody. So if everybody needs it, just like everybody needs to drink water and breathe air, then what do we test? Do we test that we need? I mean, you can during COVID for pulse oximeter, and you can test levels of dehydration, but we know it's just good practice.
Right. So it's something that everybody can really benefit from.
Yeah, for sure.
And is there any downside to taking it too much, or is there any anything that people need to consider?
Well, yeah, dose dictates poison. Obviously, you can drink too much water and die from hypotonic lysis of cells.
Yeah.
But so what we try to do, and this is very important and very different than any other company and any other product out there, is what I try to do is understand how much nitric oxide does the human body make in 24 hours, and then try to understand through diet, lifestyle, drug therapy, how much is a normal or an average human making in that 24 hours, and then let's supplement the difference, right? So we know that. Let's use vitamin D for an example. We know optimal levels of blood vitamin D is 80. If we do blood draws and it's 30, we treat to get it to 80. So we're supplementing the delta or what's missing. That's easy for vitamin D because it's stable in blood and we can measure and treat the number. Nitric oxide is not so easy. So what I had to do was create a summation of how much nitric oxide is made through the enzyme, how much nitric oxide can be optimally made through the diet, assuming oral bacteria, assuming stomach acid production. And then we take the food, we take normal dietary patterns, we look at endothelial dysfunction in a wide variety of patients. We say, okay, the average American, this is how much optimal the average American's making this, so I need to supplement this. And that's what my logic does. It supplements the delta. So what we're finding is because of the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of this delivery, if you take one lozenge every 12 hours, that gives you 24-hour coverage. But that's for someone who needs it's kind of a supplemental dose, right? But someone who's healthy. But that's much different than somebody with Alzheimer's, with cardiovascular disease, with erectile dysfunction. So then the metabolic demands and the needs for them are maybe much higher than what I need to kind of just be prophylactic and proactive. But based on the published clinical data, we know that one lozenge every 4 hours is completely safe. But
and that's how it gets administered.
That's right. Through a lozenge, it dissolves over 5 to 6 minutes, and as it's dissolving, it's releasing nitric oxide gas.
So what did you say? One lozenge every how often?
Every 4 hours. The only safety data
4 hours.
that we have published is in a 15-year-old kid taking one lozenge every 4 hours for management of his resistant hypertension. And we measured all signs of safety and toxicity, and in that particular patient population, there was no safety issue. So there's probably we could increase that, but I'm just telling to err on the side of caution. What's published in the medical literature is one.
So that would be the safe amount that everybody can take unless they need.
Yeah, that's an extreme case of a kid with a very rare genetic disorder. Most people, can get away with one lozenge every, 6, 8, maybe 10 or 12 hours. But you dose based on demand and the underlying conditions or deficiencies.
Got it. And what would happen if you had too much? What are the symptoms?
There's only two signs of toxicity. Number one, you would lose you would have an unsafe drop in blood pressure, because understand nitric oxide dilates the blood vessels. If you take too much, it's going to dilate all the blood vessels. You're going to lose perfusion pressure. You may get syncope or lightheaded because you can't perfuse the brain, and you may pass out. And then number two is a condition called methemoglobinemia. So again, too much would oxidize the heme iron of hemoglobin and reduce the oxygen carrying capacity of the red cells. You'll get cyanosis. You'll get blue around the lips. But that's you'll have an unsafe drop in blood pressure long before you start to develop any clinical methemoglobin levels. But those are the only two signs of toxicity: unsafe drop in blood pressure and met formation.
Got it. And so the way your company administers it, you said, is a lozenge. You just let it dissolve in the mouth every 6 hours on average for just somebody who wants to kind of get ahead of the game and just supplement.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a gas. We're producing a gas, and my claim to fame has been I've made a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. People said it couldn't be done. The only way they've administered nitric oxide historically is in an inpatient setting. They hook you up to a nitric oxide a gas cylinder and administer it through a nasal cannula. They're delivering the actual gas.
Right.
My challenge was, how do we deliver this in an outpatient setting for people who are not admitted to the hospital in critical care? And how do we do this prophylactically? So to create a delivery system that actually delivered this gas. So again, if your body can't make it, I had to develop this. It's called an orally disintegrating tablet. And with a very specific dissolution rate that releases a certain amount of nitric oxide over a very finite period of time. And the purpose of that is to recapitulate what the body would normally produce. So that's number one. Then number two, I wanted to improve the body's ability to naturally make it. So how do we address the root cause? And we know how to now recouple the nitric oxide synthase and improve the function in the lining of the blood vessels. So now we're seeing about a 20% improvement in natural production of nitric oxide within 20 minutes of taking a single lozenge. And then also, because it resides in the mouth, it's completely changing the oral microbiome. It's killing the pathogenic bacteria. It's giving the good non-pathogenic commensal bacteria an environment in which they can grow and repopulate and outcompete the bad guys. So if your body can't make nitric oxide, we're doing it for you, but we're fixing the reason your body's lost the ability to make it. And it's remarkable technology.
And what are, you had mentioned some of the benefits, but can you give me as much of a list of benefits?
Well, I'll tell you what's published. I mean, we do clinical studies on this technology, but if you have high blood pressure or an elevation in blood pressure, it'll normalize your blood pressure. It'll improve glucose uptake. So it'll bring down fasting glucose levels. It'll improve insulin signaling, improve exercise performance, improve sexual performance, improve executive function, improve cognition, increase stem cells in circulation. We've reversed kidney disease within 5 days. We've reversed heart disease within 5 months.
Wow.
So that's a short list.
That's incredible. And it works also for things like Alzheimer's, things that are, because I know that there's a lot of people that say you can't really reverse it. What are your findings just on certain, because you were just talking about.
We're developed. So we have a drug discovery group, Bryan Therapeutics, my company. We're developing drug therapy specifically for Alzheimer's. And I'm absolutely convinced with 100% certainty that nitric oxide will completely prevent, cure, reverse, and treat Alzheimer's disease.
Wow.
Because it addresses the root cause. Let's think about what Alzheimer's is. It's a vascular metabolic disease. Right? So if you don't have adequate blood flow to the brain, then you're not going to deliver oxygen. The cells aren't going to function. You have insulin resistance. In fact, Alzheimer's has been called diabetes type 3.
Yep.
If you can't get glucose into the cell, the mitochondria can't produce energy, and the proteins don't know what to do. They misfold, and they show up as amyloid plaque and tau tangles. So mild cognitive impairment, vascular dementia, and Alzheimer's is a deficiency or symptoms, a progressive symptom of nitric oxide deficiency. Because nitric oxide is what dilates the blood vessels, perfuse the brain. We published in 2011 that nitric oxide is required for insulin signaling and glucose uptake. So if you can't make nitric oxide, you can't dilate the blood vessels, you don't perfuse the brain, you don't get glucose into the cell, you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you get protein misfolding, and you call that amyloid plaque and tau tangles. So what we do now is if we take these patients early enough and we start giving them nitric oxide through drug therapy, we're dilating the blood vessels, we're improving blood flow to the brain. We've demonstrated this through SPECT scans and functional MRIs. We're improving glucose uptake. We're more efficiently delivering oxygen. We're improving mitochondrial function. And when you do that, the neurons work, the mitochondria produce energy, proteins do their job, they don't misfold, there's no tau tangles, and there's no amyloid plaque. And their memory improves, their cognition improves. And we've demonstrated this. Now we're going through the FDA and developing an FDA-approved clinical trial to demonstrate that this will actually work in these early Alzheimer's patients. So we hope to start that study maybe the end of the year, first of next year. But the data are very, very impressive, and it makes sense because we understand the mechanism of Alzheimer's development, progression, and disease. And the reason that people think that Alzheimer's isn't curable or treatable is because they've gone after the wrong target. All Alzheimer's drugs have failed. and they failed because they're targeting the tau tangles and the amyloid plaque, making monoclonal antibodies against those. The amyloid plaque and the tau tangles do not cause the disease. They're the consequence of the disease.
Right.
So of
Yeah.
course these look, these
Isn't
companies
that kind of similar to cholesterol?
say again.
It's similar to cholesterol. It's not, it comes for a reason.
Yeah, no, look, treating cholesterol for heart disease. I mean, all you have to do is look at the numbers. It's still
Mhm.
the number one killer of men and women worldwide, and cholesterol lowering medication is causing a rampant of disease from diabetes to cancers to myalgia.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the worst thing I could imagine was getting your cholesterol below 200.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating because, of course, especially with reproductive health, it really does impact it because it's the backbone of so many hormones. And I also think about, the whole idea of how the glucose intake and like insulin resistance in cases of PCOS. So I imagine, I don't know if you have any data on that. That would be really fascinating to hear.
Yeah, no, for sure. We see a lot of and work with a lot of endocrinologists and OB-GYNs who treat a lot of PCOS women. But look, it's a multifactorial disease. But at the end of the day, they suffer from the same thing: insulin resistance, poor
Hmm.
circulation, poor blood flow, poor cellular turnover, and so you can trace that back to a loss of nitric oxide production. There are other contributing factors to that, but certainly you can improve insulin signaling. And then the other
Hmm.
thing is, if you and you mentioned it, if you don't have enough cholesterol, you can't make estrogen and testosterone. But really, for the viability of a cell, whether it's an ovum or a sperm cell, you have to have a good cell membrane that maintains a cellular potential. And these
Hmm.
phospholipid bilayers are embedded with cholesterol because it acts as an
Right.
insulator to
Yeah.
maintain that electrical potential or separation. And if you don't have a good cell membrane with a lot of good cholesterol in there, then you lose that electrical potential and the cell becomes dysfunctional.
Right. This is so fascinating. So, have you had any clinical trials or studies on reproductive dysfunction besides ED, you'd mentioned, which is important because a lot of couples that are trying to
Yeah,
conceive, sometimes the man is experiencing that. So, that can obviously throw a wrench into the
for
whole
sure.
plan of trying to conceive.
Yeah, not outside of erectile dysfunction. I mean, that's obviously the obvious indication because it's a vascular problem typically in men. If you can't produce nitric oxide, you can't dilate the blood vessels, so men don't get engorged. And the same thing with women, right? We have to
Hmm.
have clitoral erections and increase in clitoral pressure and labial pressure in order for women to have an orgasm. If they can't make nitric oxide, they can't increase blood flow and increase volume and increase pressure. But I will tell you a story probably 25 years ago when I was, I think, a student at LSU and we were doing mouse studies. And I realized early on I wasn't very good at sexing mouse, determining if a mouse was male or female. And so we'd have to sex them and then put them in separate cages. But obviously, I put a male in a female cage, and we were doing experiments, a nitric oxide experiment. We had a placebo, and we had, a solution that would improve nitric oxide production or availability in these mice. And what we found was that in the cage of mice where I put the male that was getting the enhanced nitric oxide, when these females had litters, they had like 12 to 15, 16 pups per litter. And this was
Hmm.
consistent. In the placebo, they were only getting, 8, 10, maybe 11 pups. And so the vets would come to me and they go, "What the hell is going on here? We've never seen this size of litters in these mice." And then I realized, well, and then they go, "Well, why are they having babies if they're all female?" Then they sexed them and realized I'd placed a male in the female
Hmm.
cages. And so it was an interesting observation. So then we did a little follow up experiments and found that it's improving sperm motility and it's
Hmm.
improving the viability of the egg. Now, again, these are in healthy mice where we control the light environment, we control the food and everything they're doing, and that's much different than humans that have different genetics, different lifestyle, different diet, different drug
Right.
therapy, a lot of things going on that we cannot control. But I think now, even in the published literature, you'll find that nitric oxide is going to increase sperm motility, which is extremely important because now men today, sperm motility is a huge problem, and I think part of the problem for the infertility, and then you got the other side of the coin where how viable is the egg,
Hmm.
and do they have normal ovulation cycles, and is it proceeding down the fallopian tubes, and is the uterine lining sufficient for embedding once it's fertilized to support the normal growth and replication of that cell? But there's so many things that are required, and it's really the miracle of conception and childbirth. But again,
Yeah.
if you don't have good blood flow to the uterine lining or the placenta to
Or the ovaries.
adequately
Yeah.
ovaries, then
Yeah.
you're never going to conceive. But it's all about circulation, oxygen delivery, mitochondrial
Hmm.
function.
It's fascinating. Are you thinking about maybe in the future looking in the reproductive area?
Probably eventually. We have a kind of a list of priorities. Number one is we've got our heart disease drug. We're going into clinical trials this year through the FDA. Alzheimer's is obviously a very important topic and high on our priority. And then we're also
Yeah.
making a topical drug for diabetic ulcers and non-healing wounds. So those are
Hmm.
really the top three, because 65,000 Americans die in nursing homes every year from wounds that get infected and they get septic and die. And to me, that's
Hmm.
completely unacceptable, because nitric oxide will heal every non-healing wound. We haven't seen a
Wow.
wound that we haven't been able to heal.
Really fascinating. This work is so fascinating. I could definitely pick your brain for hours. I mean,
Yeah.
um, it's just incredible to know. Like, and I always believe this. Like, there's always a solution out there. It just hasn't been discovered yet. But yet, it's something so natural that the body produces, and I find this really remarkable. And so, for people listening to this that are really curious as to what kind of product you have or created, how can they find more information?
Well, number one, I'm less interested in selling a product, and I'm more interested in about providing education. But I encourage people
Hmm.
to read my latest book called The Secret of Nitric Oxide, Bring the
Hmm.
Science to Life, because it's really, it's informative, and it's one of these things that people need to know about this, because there are things that they're
Yeah.
doing that may be inhibiting the natural production of nitric oxide, and simply making some very simple cost-saving lifestyle changes can have a dramatic impact on their life. So that's number one. For those interested in product technology, it's n101.com. It's the letter N, number
Hmm.
one, letter O, number one.com. So N101 dot com. But yeah, we make the lozenge. We make a fermented beet powder, because I was so frustrated with people, um, being deceived through these advertising, that if they wanted beets and a beet the source of nitric oxide, then I felt like I had a responsibility and obligation to give them a beet product that actually works. And that's called No Beets or NO Beets. We make an
Hmm.
entire skincare line of product, because once I figured out that we could heal wounds to topical nitric oxide, I thought, well, the skin is an organ, just like the sex organs, the heart and the brain, and we need blood flow to the skin. So I make a topical nitric oxide for fine lines and wrinkles. And then, understanding the harmful antiseptic effects of fluoride and fluoride-based toothpaste, I had to develop my own nitric oxide-friendly toothpaste. It's hydroxyapatite based, so it remineralizes the teeth, but it supports the microbiome.
Hmm.
And so we're developing a nitric oxide friendly mouth rinse for people who want to use a mouthwash. Let's not sterilize their mouth. Let's support the microbiome instead of killing it like the Listerines of the world. And this is having a remarkable effect on public health. We're finding people that have been on prescription medication for 30 or 40 years for their blood pressure, and they switch to our toothpaste and start taking our lozenge, and their blood pressure becomes normal. And now, for the first time in 30
It's
years, they don't take
amazing.
prescription medication.
Wow, incredible. I'm thinking about so many people in my family that I can
Yeah.
help with this. And, a lot of it is preventative. My mom, thank God, she has a great brain, but I want her to have that, and continue that for a long time. So it's definitely something that I'm thinking about myself, plus my patients. So it's also, for me, I am interested in looking into the product because I want it from somebody who really understands the whole process and how it can translate. And it sounds like you've done some clinical trials on the product itself.
For sure. Look, we go through the same rigors we do for drug therapy, because we have to, number one, like I said, we have to maintain the integrity of the science. And, I had to
Mhm.
step away from academia to make sure that, because here's what happens in academic institutions, you license the technology to companies and they run with it, and then they do with it what they will. But because what we've done is so disruptive, you can put your technology in the wrong hands of people that really don't have your best interest or the interest of
Mhm.
the field in mind. So I had to step away from academia to make sure that this technology saw the light of day because it's so disruptive. There are a lot of companies out there who would like to shelve this technology and never let it see the light of day. So, because we're focused only on the science and advancing the science and putting to market products that actually deliver on nitric oxide. And so I am less interested in developing products that are profitable than I am on delivering products that actually work. Obviously, we're a for-profit company and we have to make money, but I will never desert the science for profitability, which all companies out there do. I've seen it. I've been involved
Hmm.
with them, and they become money hungry, envy, or greedy, and it doesn't do the field any good. So
Yeah.
that's my mission, is to continue to put products on the market that deliver on nitric oxide, and eventually all these other pretend to be nitric oxide companies will go away, because when people don't feel the effects, or people they don't provide benefit, then people stop buying them.
Yeah, so interesting. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bryan. This is a great conversation. I think that a lot of people will be very interested in learning more about this. And I guess they can find your book on Amazon. I have the link to your information, all your links in the episode notes if anybody wants to find them.
And
But thank you
also,
so much. I learned a lot.
well,
What's
thank you very much. I would encourage people to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Dr. Nathan S. Bryan, Nitric Oxide. We'll cover topics outside fertility and cardiovascular. So it's such an educational side. And then on social media, Instagram, Dr. Nathan S. Bryan, LinkedIn. So thanks so much for having this conversation. And I look forward to continuing on with you.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.